Namaste, konnichiwa. Welcome to the Nupur Tewari Show. And today we have a very special guest, and he is none other than Mohit Chaubey. Mohit is an athlete, an author, and he is an Iron Man. So, Mohit, welcome to the Nupur Tewari Show.
Thank you so much, Nupur. It's a pleasure for me being here.
Thank you so much for joining us. And we are very excited to know about your book, Ungrateful Nation. Ungrateful Nation. Actually, we have a lot of questions. You are an Iron Man, you are an athlete, you are an author as well. And this is not only your only one book. You have written so many books, but today definitely we would love to know about this book. There is a reason, because I'm doing series on Indianarmy, and this book has connection with Indianarmy. So we'd love to know about Ungrateful Nation. What is all about?
Sure. So yes, it is my second book, but it's closest to my heart. And the reason is very personal. My father donned the uniform for 38 years. He was part of the 1965 war with Pakistan and the 1971 war, the liberation of Bangladesh. In both these endeavors, he was part of the liberating forces, and he was there in both the countries. Eventually, he served the uniform for just under 39 years, and obviously it has had a big impact on me. That is the seed of the book. An Ungrateful Nation primarily covers the attitude of Indians towards the army man, towards the man in uniform, and actually towards defense of the nation as a whole.
So why did you choose the title Ungrateful?
Because somewhere we take it for granted. I think so. Somewhere as Indians, post 1947, post achieving independence, we seem to be taking our freedom for granted. And a lot of that preservation of that independence and that freedom, which we exercise, is a function of the service and valor of people in the uniform who ensure not merely a territorial integrity of the nation, but I think as a fabric of the nation is upheld by them. And for some reason, we don't seem to be really either aware of it or really comprehend what they do and how they do, and give them the due in various aspects of life. And that's why I believe as a nation, I think we are not really grateful for what we get from these men and women in uniform.
So this is definitely you. Your father was in army. You haven't joined the army, but your childhood definitely you were raised in an army environment, I'm sure. So after being a civilian, do you think that we haven't given that much credit to the army what we should have? Because you were raised in an army environment, and you are a normal person, civilian, just like us. So why, if so, why is that? Why did we do that?
I think a lot of factors have contributed to it. Surprisingly, one of the factors is most of the growing up children, the kids, really, when we read history, and most of us have history as a compulsory subject till class 10th in India, beyond 1947, we really don't have history beyond that. We, as a nation, have had 4, and including Kargil, 5 wars we have fought as a nation. I think so. Other than Israel, even they have not fought 4 wars. We have fought 5 wars, excluding IPKF mission, and yet there is no mention of that in our history books. So basically, if you see, as the children are growing up, they're really not aware of this species of people who wear the uniform, and they feel they come from a different planet or they come with a different mindset. But whereas they all come from normal people. And in this process, we have completely kind of taken things for granted. And it starts right from there, but sadly, it does not end there. Eventually, even in the government scheme of things or in the administration, the relative parity of the armed forces has been continuously degraded over the years. It will be surprising for many listeners to know that the first army chief in India was not an Indian, because the political establishment did not feel he had the competence to run an army. And only in 15 January 1950, if I'm correct, was when the first Indian army chief took over, General Cariappa. For a nation which took 2.5 years for its own army chief to be there, speaks volumes about the confidence we had in this entity. At the same time, we had a political leadership who had no experience of administration and yet they were holding the highest office in the country. So this was a dichotomy which started very early since the inception of us as a nation, and this dichotomy has continued to exist.
So this is a very valuable and very unknown information, I would say, for me as well, and for all the viewers. So like why we did that, like our administration after independence, because today I think we are a free country where it is a democracy and everybody's saying whatever they like, and I think we have our role for spreading positive awareness. I think that is the thing. I think that we should be responsible citizen and we should spread this positive awareness. So do you think, like, what happened after independence, like you said, that it took the political leader, they did not have even that much knowledge also, but they did lead the country, and even the men in uniform also. So do you think that we should have changed from that time? We had the wrong leadership?
I would not say necessarily the wrong leadership. I would also try to put the genesis on how we gained independence. As a nation, the strong belief is that obviously the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, and the other leaders in the Congress did play a very important part in the non-violent freedom struggle. Nothing can be taken away from that. But the fact of the matter is, between the Quit India movement of 1942 and subsequent independence in 1947, many things happened. First was the war effort by the Indian Army, especially the Indian Army. There were 2.5 million men of the Indian Army deployed in the Allied initiative. That's a huge number. Not much is spoken about them. The second thing is, eventually, the British realized that for them to control the political and the geographical entity of India, they needed much more force, because the nationalistic feeling became even more strong in the Indian Army, in the Indian Armed Forces. It eventually culminated in the Naval Mutiny in Bombay. And again, very few people will be aware of that, which signaled very clearly to the British establishment that the time for being able to lead men merely by command and structure would not work. They needed people now who really believed in it. And it was clear that the armed forces were looking at very clearly fighting for the country and not merely fighting for the uniform. It went beyond the uniform now. So all these factors contributed actually to the independence happening in 15th August 1947. The second factor is the belief being that non-violence became a primary state policy. Now that state policy becoming so primary, as a part of the statecraft, military aggression or military assertion becomes relevant. It becomes relevant in even the most non-violent countries. Not many people know, but even Mahatma Gandhi served during the Boer Wars, which was in South Africa. While he espoused non-violence, the fact of the matter is there were situations in which you need to assert yourself. So as a part of the statecraft, India as a political entity refused to acknowledge it for a significant period that military assertion is part of statecraft and needs to be incorporated so. So it is more about the thought process and not merely in terms of leadership. It is also about the thought process. Yes, we had one odd and a very significant leader at that point of time, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, who was very vociferous about military assertion, and to some extent it resulted in the amalgamation of princely states into the country. But by and large, the tenets of international diplomacy primarily vested on mutual respect and lack of violence, which obviously in a real world and a real politic cannot hold for long. And we paid for it badly in 1962. And I think it took us quite some time before we realized. And even now, I don't think as a nation, we perceive the armed forces as an important instrument in state polity. It has to be there. It is not about being a militaristic nation. It is about being a realistic nation.
So your father was in army for 38 years, you said.
He was in the army, and then subsequently he was in the BSF, which is the border guarding force. Okay. A total of 38 years since from 1963 to 2001.
And definitely, since you have written the book, so you have spoken with him, and so do you think he felt that way also?
Most people in the uniform do experience this sense of apathy. And the minute they come out of their cantonments, they find that the world outside seems to be either they are ignorant of the outside world or the outside world is ignorant of them. And I did find him at odds with when he took his annual leave and we used to go to our hometown Jaipur, and suddenly he used to find all this chaos around him and he found it difficult to kind of relate to it or to accept it. So to that extent, obviously, while it manifested or while it was a consequence of his disciplined approach towards life, but it also reflected in some way the complete ignorance of the outside world towards these men and women. He did feel about it. Did he feel as strongly as this? Maybe not. Maybe I am a bit more vociferous about it. Maybe I'm a bit more hardcore, how do you say, staunch believer that it cannot be merely about respect for the uniform. It is to be very clearly a statecraft. It is to be a part of your political discourse. It is important to also ensure that we become a relevant player in the global scheme of things. There is another extreme of the US which uses military as the primary statecraft. I do not advocate that. At the same time, I believe statecraft needs to incorporate this as an important element, even in terms of strategic decision making, as also tactical decision making. And I think he may agree with many of my thoughts. Did they all come articulated out? No, I think most of that has got articulated in my book. And when the readers go through An Ungrateful Nation, they will definitely see some of his voice coming out through my words.
Wonderful. Definitely, I'd like to request all the viewers to read the book, Ungrateful Nation. And as you already explained that why we are ungrateful. So do you think this is the time we should express our gratitude and become grateful for men in the uniform, men and women?
I think it can definitely start with that. I think it's not merely about changing your Facebook profiles, changing your DP, or standing with the armed forces. I think it also needs to manifest in behavior. It also needs to manifest in various government policies. It needs also to manifest in understanding why there is a one rank, one pension. For that matter, why is there pension at all? Because I have seen people, and within my fraternity, questioning that why does a soldier get a pension? And I find it difficult to explain to them that a 16-year-old soldier who joins the Indian Army and eventually, if he does not go up the ranks and is basically in combat mode, retires at the age of 32. Now, either you absorb that person in a commensurate assignment or a responsibility which ensures his livelihood. But other than that, if you're not able to take care of his financial wherewithal for the rest of his life, then we are really asking too much from the populace. And we will again face the same shortage which we face in our officer cadre. As of now, in the armed forces, there's a deficiency of around 13,000 officers. Thankfully, on the soldiers, we don't have that much of a deficiency. But if we do start coming up with these half-baked solutions and notions, I'm sure the world's largest voluntary military force, and not many people are aware of that, it is the world's largest voluntary military force, will see severe lack of manpower, and obviously it will result in various issues regarding insecurity and integrity. So it has to go mere acknowledgement. It has to be in terms of understanding, and from the government entities, I think it needs to start becoming integrated into the discourse, especially in our schools and colleges. It needs to become that, and there are various aspects in which this can be taken care of. As a nation, it took us 72 years to make our world first war memorial. 72 years for a nation which had fought five wars. I mean, it is. I'm thankful to the British at least for this, that they created the India Gate, which we kept on using as a mark of respect for our soldiers. But it took 72 years for us to make our first war memorial. I think it speaks volumes about it. I mean, if there's anything else which can talk about an ungrateful nation, I think so that says it all.
So because we are ungrateful, that's why we don't have that many officers that's why the lack of officers in Indian Army. Do you think that is one of the reasons?
That's one of the reasons. Also, in terms of the glitz and the glamour which was associated with the army, slowly that has got either eroded away, or the opportunities in the corporate world or the outside world have become much more enticing. Now you need to, if it needs to be an enticing career, if it needs to be an enticing opportunity, you need to find ways and means to make it more valued for the person to be joining. At the end of the day, it is a conscious decision. It is not as if people are merely seeking a job, they're seeking a lifelong association with an entity. But it needs to be something which makes them gravitate towards it.
Have you ever considered joining Indian Army?
Yes, I did. Actually, incidentally, I was in the National Defense Academy way back in 1993, I think. Yes. I did suffer an injury, but more important than the injury, I also had very, very strong notions. So I think so. I'm a very rebellious person. So between the combination of injury and my thought process, I did not pursue it much. But then life had a different discourse awaiting for me, and eventually resulted in me being a corporate leader for the past 2 decades. As far as my love and association with fitness was concerned, eventually it manifested in me being one of the first few Indians to complete the Comrades Ultra Marathon in South Africa, which is a 90-kilometer run over mountains. And I'm a 5-time Ironman. So at least in terms of fitness, etc., not only the Army guy, I can give a run for the money to the Special Forces guys, with whom I'm supposed to be training soon. They have given me an invite to run with the soldiers and train them on the 100-kilometer run, which is very integral to their part of their being baptized as a Special Forces commando.
So you are, somehow you are connected with men and women in the uniform, though. So you definitely you had your corporate life, but you have seen your father in Indian Army. So how different that life, like you have seen your father's life and you had your corporate life. I think still you have, right? You are still in corporate.
Yeah, I'm absolutely. I'm still in the corporate life. It is not going anywhere. It is different. It is very different. Much more structure in the cantonment. Much more, how do you say, protected environment in the civilian life. What I try and provide to my children, I think I end up providing them plenty. But am I able to provide them that kind of a structure and guidance? The question is still to be answered. I think so. The verdict will be given later. But I've tried to inculcate the same set of principles with my children. Incidentally, my wife's father was also in the army. So to that extent, yeah, we are a family which has olive green kind of flowing somewhere in our blood. My brother-in-law is in the army. My uncles were commando trainers. So I'm the black sheep, incidentally. And so while there might be material difference in the way my father and we lived and the way I live with my children, but we try to incorporate the same set of principles, the same way of living. And while there might be plenty, there needs to be more gratitude towards all that is there. And but in the end, I think so. Both lives have their charm, and both can be very meaningful and impactful.
True. So you said that our wars, they are not in the history books. So today's generation, especially children, they are not aware of it. So, do you think that the present government should include those wars about, and especially the heroes, our heroes, we only, when it comes to history, we only talk about mostly, I don't know about other state, but definitely my state, mostly about, we studied about Mughals. I think a few chapters, only Mughals, how great they were, and a little bit Chandragupta Maurya, and then after that, studying Mughals. So do you think that we should just make it a little bit lesser, those chapters, and include our real heroes, men and women in uniform?
See, there are two things which predominate any historical narration. A historical narration will have predominance based on A, recency, and B, impact. So I think so. Historical narration obviously keeps these two paradigms in cognition when it's put there. So to that extent, if there is a perception that Mughal history seems to be pronounced, I think so one of the factors might be the continuity of that history and the recency factor of it. To that extent, if you see even the pre-independence history, right from the first war of independence or even prior to that till 1947, there is fair amount of literature available. Surprisingly, post 1947, nothing is there, and that's something which we've talked about. Yes, there needs to be very clearly incorporation of that. And history is always evolving, and there will be elements and facets of it which will need to be pronounced over a period of time so that relevant context and learning can be derived from that. And it is very imperative, not merely for current government, for any government or for any administration, to ensure that the historical information is available for the next generations to incorporate it. It may not require you to give a judgment on it or to put a bias towards it, but at least the information availability needs to be there. So I'll give you a simple example. The last biggest capture of prisoners of war happened in Stalingrad in the Second World War. After that, the biggest capture of all the POWs was in the India's liberation of Bangladesh when 92,000 Pakistani soldiers surrendered. It is the second largest surrender ever in the history of warfare, and nobody knows it. I mean, even my own children, I need to tell them because they've not read it. It's just that I try and keep giving them doses which are relevant to the Indian polity and the Indian armed forces. But the fact of the matter is, nobody's aware. The largest tank battle after the Second World War was fought in 1965 in a place called Asal Uttar. It's in the Punjab border. And we made a complete mess of the Patton tanks, which the Americans had given to the Pakistanis. And it was it was nicknamed the graveyard of the Patton tank. And so to that extent, the awareness and knowledge and pride in things which we have done well. We have not done some things well. We should be aware of that also. We should not glean over our failures, but at the same time, we should also be aware of the successes which we have done. I think all of us need to be aware so that we are very clear about what we are as an Indian, because Indian is not merely in terms of ethnicities, it's also in terms of understanding of our cultural paradigm and our history behind it.
So the viewers who are watching this show, I'd like you to just tell how we can be more grateful, what kind of steps we should take. So today's generation, they can express their gratitude and express how grateful we are to our armed forces, men and women.
I think they should start with one simple thing: get awareness. I think so. Just become aware. I think so that awareness aspect, and since it may not be available in literature, while my book, I'm sure, definitely can serve as a good starting point. But beyond that, there is enough and more literature which is available, not necessarily in the formalized form, but maybe in terms of books and other medium. Get your awareness levels up. Understand what does it mean to be an army man. Also, please understand that they're not born with some specific traits. These are people who have put themselves into a certain machine and gone through tough times to come out stronger and sturdier. You're not born with. My first ultra marathon of 90 kilometers I did when I turned 40. I was not born with it. At 40 years, I did that. My first Ironman I finished when I was 45 years old. So the fact of the matter is, I'm using that as a simile, the same way the armed forces people, they are normal people, human beings like us. They have a certain vocation, they have a certain calling. They go there, they polish themselves under the toughest of conditions, and then they come out of it strong. So start becoming more aware, be cognizant of that. And if nothing, just say a thank you if you meet any one of them. I think so that will go a long way in at least changing the perception amongst people, and it might just be the starting point, but as a simple thing, start getting more aware of it.
And what do you think, how we can have more officers in Indian Army, how we can spread that awareness?
That's a tough one. So yes, maybe so if I go into my corporate paradigm, marketing of the product. So if the marketing of the product out here is being an officer in the Indian Army, first is awareness level, second is marketing in terms of putting across what all benefits are there. So I remember 2 decades back, HTA or Lintas, I mean, one of the 2 agencies, they had put together an advertisement campaign. It said, "Do you have it in you?" So it was a challenge to the youth to come forward and pick up the domain. But right now, it'll have to be twofold. One, create awareness. B, highlight to the people, highlight to the youth what all opportunities come there for you. It's not merely about taking up a career, it's about molding yourself, your personality, and leading a life which you really seek fulfillment from. And also at the same time, creating a certain parity with the civil administration. Because a civil servant serving in Guwahati cannot get a hardship allowance more than a soldier who's serving in Siachen. So either you are saying that my soldier is so tough that I appraise him on a much higher benchmark, or you're saying my civil servant is really, a wimp, that he finds even in one of the state capitals to live, he finds it difficult to live there. So what I'm saying is the economic parity, the administrative parity, and the social parity needs to be put together, and I think people will come forth.
Yeah, and definitely, and these awareness should be there. So thank you so much for, I think, you are just doing the promotional activity for Indian Army here, though you indirectly you are related, but we are doing it directly. So we'd love to know your future plans.
My future plans, as far as book is concerned, I've been approached by one of the bigger publishing houses to publish something within the armed forces. So I am in talks with a fairly senior army gentleman, and I'm looking to co-author a book with him. Cannot disclose names because that has to be yet to be signed off. So that's on the book side. On the personal side, I am looking at running a 100-mile run from Jaisalmer to the Indian border. That's 160 kilometers of run. So I'm preparing for that. On the corporate side, obviously, yes, I keep on doing my leadership and coaching, and that's something which will continue to go on. But for me, life is about athletics, life is about my profession, and life is about writing, and especially writing about the armed forces. I think that's something which is very close to my heart.
Wonderful. We wish you all the best, and we cannot just wait for your next book. And for the viewers, definitely, do read Ungrateful Nation, because I think that is the first step it would be to know about Indian Army and positive. You can just spread that positivity, and we can have the more Indian, more officers in Indian Army, which actually lacking. So thank you.
Something I will just 1 second. Sorry, before you just conclude, just wanted to add for the readers, the book is not a typical book in terms of reading about the glories of the Indian Army. It is pivoted around a protagonist who's as real life as you and me. So it is about his unfolding journey. And in the journey, I'm sure the reader will find excitement, will find pathos, will find various sentiments and emotions tugging at him or her. And it will be a journey and which they will embark upon, feeling much more fulfilled and refreshed. So just wanted to add that bit. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. That is, I think, that those words were very much needed, and that is it is adding more values to the book. So I'm sure the readers would be more interested after listening to you, and do get this book and do read it from today. So thank you, Mohit. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, and we will look forward to your next book, and we look forward to have you again on this show. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and namaste.
Namaste.